The battle over the impeachment inquiry spotlights the divisions among Texans in Congress.
There's just no there. There's nothing here that would be a crime.
Republicans say it's the wrong move. Democrats say it's about time.
I hope that we will move forward expeditiously and consider specific articles of impeachment.
But see how one Texas Republican on a key committee is trying to find some middle ground. Hello and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Phil Prazen. This week's impeachment inquiry highlights the divisions in American politics. And the members of Congress from Texas are also divided. Republicans fiercely oppose it. Democrats support it.
I'm pleased this is finally happening. This president really seems to know no limits when it comes to trampling our democracy. But I believe this time he's gone a little too far.
They have chosen a partisan political path which will absolutely suck all the oxygen out of Washington. It will be an obsession of the media and the American people until it is concluded.
On Thursday, the House Intelligence Committee held an open hearing to question the Director of National Intelligence about how he handled the whistleblower's complaint. The committee also released an unclassified version of that complaint. 4 Texans are on the Intelligence Committee. And one of them is Republican Will Hurd, and he spoke Thursday night in Austin at the Texas Tribune Festival. Congressman Will Hurd answered questions from Trib co-founder Evan Smith and gave insight into how he thinks the inquiry should move forward.
So you said that a lot of what you saw in the whistleblower report was concerning. Does it rise to the level of being conduct that warrants impeachment?
I think that's a premature conversation to have. This is why you have investigations. This is why you explore this information. This is why you bring these people into the committee and have this collect additional documents to understand what really went on. Because again, everything in this document were allegations. And we should make sure we're doing everything to confirm those allegations.
But isn't that what Speaker Pelosi is calling for, Congressman? She's not saying impeach the guy. She's calling it an impeachment inquiry. She's saying we need to investigate. We need to set up a mechanism where the 6 committees, relevant committees, and their chairs pour information back, as she's now decided, to the Judiciary Committee. And they're going to lead, as I understand it again, this inquiry, different from straight-up impeachment.
I'll be frank, everybody's getting wrapped around the axle on a word, right? And the last 2 times that a president had been formally impeached, it was a vote by the entire House, and that vote was done in a bipartisan way, and it was after all the committees had done their investigation.
Well, they're looking for a Republican to join, and they said, what about Will Hurd?
Well, look, you know, Jerry Nadler and Judiciary, Chairman Schiff on the Intel Committee, we are having hearings. We should be bringing people in, having these conversations. I hope on the Intel Committee, most of these are in the classified setting so that we can have honest conversations. And transparency is important, and we should be able to produce as much as we can after that. But again, this is not kicking somebody off of Survivor, right? This is a serious process that we need to deliberate, and we need to have the right folks come in. And I think we can learn from, I never would have thought I'd say this, I think we can learn from the senators in how they're moving forward and protecting.
So the investigation, at least, is appropriate. It is not presidential harassment, as the president has tweeted about it.
Look, there are allegations in that report that are concerning and should be followed.
Need to be investigated.
Need to be investigated.
All the Democrats in the Texas delegation support the call for an impeachment inquiry, but several of them only came on board this week. I'm joined now by Abby Livingston, the Washington, D.C. bureau chief for the Texas Tribune. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I guess just first question is, what has it been like in Washington, D.C. this week? It seems like it is crazy.
It's even crazier than it looks from the outside. The level of uncertainty and tension at the U.S. Capitol is unlike anything I've seen, and I've seen a lot of crazies in the past few years. And there is absolutely no sense of where this is headed, and people are making decisions not based on politics and how they think it'll play in their districts, because they don't know.
Really?
It's flying blind.
And have you kind of had a front row seat to something like this in the past, or is this... Have you ever seen anything like this before?
I mean, there's been interesting days, like the day Speaker Boehner retired, the Majority Leader Eric Cantor lost re-election. The baseball shooting is probably the only thing I'd put in the same category. And so this has been just borderline bizarre, but it's been a great day or a great week to be a reporter.
Yeah, and so all the Texas Democratic Congress members now support this impeachment inquiry, but that was not the case last week.
Correct.
Why such the fast change?
So this story with the Washington Post first broke about there was some sort of inappropriate, allegedly, conversation between the president and some leader of another country. At first, it was it was fuzzy. The details weren't clear. Over the course of the weekend, freshmen Democrats, and these are people, many of whom won in Trump districts, where President Trump got more votes than Hillary Clinton. They started to kind of rally together and say, we're ready to move on this. And that had been the thing that had been holding Speaker Pelosi back. She was trying to protect them. She is not really an enthusiastic fan of impeachment. And so everything changed Monday night. 7 freshman Democrats, none of whom are from Texas, but they all have backgrounds in national security and the military intelligence, came out with an op-ed basically floating the word of impeachment. And I went to bed that night thinking, I need to go to sleep now because I think tomorrow is going to be crazy. 9 a.m., Colin Allred, vulnerable congressman from Dallas, announces he is considering impeachment. A couple hours later, Lizzie Fletcher, vulnerable congresswoman from Houston, and then some more senior Democrats in the delegation who were kind of waiting to see what they would do to give them space started to come down too.
And what type of risk is there for the Colin Allreds, the Lizzie Fletchers? I mean, are there going to be swing voters that will vote against them on this issue in their district, do you think?
It's very hard to tell at this point. There is some early polling. I never trust just one poll. There is some evidence this is moving in the Democrats' direction or in the pro-impeachment direction. I'm not quite ready to assert that. I think we don't know. They seem to think that they can make the case to their districts, and their districts will sit down, their voters will learn the issues and come to their side. That said, Republicans were gleeful when these announcements came out, putting out press release after press release. One of Fletcher's potential rivals said, I stand with Trump. He put out a robocall hammering her on this and calling her a radical. So right now, I think there's just a lot of uncertainty, and it's too early to see a lot of internal polling.
There will be a lot of Texans wanting to pay attention. Where can they find your work? What do you...
TexasTribune.org.
And then you're also one of the best ones on Twitter as well.
Oh, I like to have fun on Twitter.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Impeaching a president is difficult, but it has happened before.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
We look closer at the history, the process, and why it's so hard to remove a president from office. Changes in the Texas House. 2 Republicans say they're leaving, and Democrats have a new leader in the effort to turn those red seats blue. President Donald Trump could be impeached over his phone call with the Ukrainian president. He's accused of withholding aid to that country in exchange for an investigation into the family of one of his Democratic rivals. The stakes are whether to remove President Trump from office, and it's important to note that this is a political process, not a criminal one. Remember, the Mueller report reinforced the policy from the Justice Department that a sitting president cannot be indicted with a crime. So, let's take a look at this political process. Impeaching a president and removing them from office is very, very hard to do. No president has ever been removed from office by this process. First, a member of the House of Representatives must bring an impeachment resolution before the House. Then, the House Judiciary Committee must approve the idea by a majority vote. Then, a majority of the entire House of Representatives must approve it, getting 218 votes or more out of 435. There, you've impeached the president. And think of it like charging them with a crime for bribery, treason, or a vague, often argued over phrase, high crimes and misdemeanors. And if the House charges the president, the Senate is the jury. 2/3 of the Senate must convict the president for him to be removed. And we've come close, but this has never happened. In 1868, Democrat President Andrew Johnson fired his Secretary of War. That was the last straw between him and the Republicans who wanted to control Reconstruction after the Civil War. They thought he was too sympathetic to the former Confederate states and wanted him out. But Johnson survived by 1 vote. Then, Democratic President Bill Clinton was impeached.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Not for his affair with the intern Monica Lewinsky, but for perjury and obstruction of justice trying to cover it up. He was impeached by the House, but not convicted by the Senate. He actually became more popular as Republicans tried to oust him, so much so that Newt Gingrich, Republican Speaker of the House, ended up resigning, and Clinton finished out 8 years as president. But what about Nixon, you say? Wasn't he impeached? Well, no. After the Watergate break-in, leaders in the House and Senate said they had the votes and began the process, but Nixon resigned before they could finish. So what about now and impeaching President Trump? Americans are in no way unified on this issue. Despite low approval ratings, in a poll hot off the press this week, only 37% of Americans want him impeached. 57% do not. And right now, Republicans control the Senate, so a 2/3 vote is not likely unless Republicans turn on their president. And both major political parties can take this issue into the 2020 election with the wedge issues of all wedge issues. Do you support President Donald Trump, or should he be removed from office? Democrats name a new leader to help turn the Texas House blue.
I want people to know your voice matters, and your voice is your vote, and Texas needs you.
How she's pushing to get people involved for the campaigns ahead. Texans set a new record for voter registration, and the number keeps rising.
So we want to make sure that everyone that's eligible registers to vote.
We'll meet the woman who has the task of raising voter turnout and what she's doing to get more people to the polls. Changes are coming to the Texas House. 2 Republicans say they're leaving. Mike Lang of Granbury and Houston's Dwayne Bohack. The move comes as Texas Democrats build their campaign to turn the state house blue. And joining us now for perspective is State Representative Celia Israel, a Democrat from Austin and Pflugerville. Now, you were named to lead the Texas House Democratic Campaign Committee.
Yes.
So for somebody who doesn't know what that is, what is going to be your role in this next election cycle?
It's a fair question. It's HDCC, and it is the only, it's a PAC. It's the only PAC designed just for not only Texas House members, but Democrats. And we gained 12 seats last cycle. We want to protect those 12 seats. And then, given the political energy that we're all feeling, we want to capitalize and grow our numbers.
And, you know, the stakes are pretty high in the Texas House. I mean, no matter if you know, President Trump or the Democratic nominee wins Texas for the Electoral College, I mean, if your side of the aisle takes the Texas House, that really shakes things up when it comes to redistricting. Has that been felt? I mean, do you think people understand the opportunity and the stakes of this?
No, but I think that's part of our story. People aren't even aware, because we're not in the census year yet, that we have to have a good census year. In other states, they are investing in getting out the word about census. Texas is not spending a nickel on that, but the census sets the stage for redistricting. And when the voters speak in November of 20, then they send a new crew of knuckleheads, as I call them, members of the House, to go back in 2021 and do the maps. But that's way down the road. So before we get there, we've got 150 members of the House. We've got 67 Democrats. And we would like to get to 76 plus so that we can then determine the makeup of the redistricting and the maps.
What are you going to do this cycle that you haven't done in the past cycle? And by you, I mean Democrats, because I have heard since I've been living in Texas that, you know, this year is going to be this year is going to be when the blue wave comes and takes over Texas, and it's never completely panned out. Are you going to do anything different or unique?
Well, right now we are just committed to coordinating with one another. It's a big state, and what I think is happening with every 2-year cycle is, number one, we're getting off the worst list, meaning voter turnout, and we're becoming better. We had a historic turnout in 2018. 80% of Texans now live in an urban environment. We are connected to one another. That has a challenge when you're doing a campaign. That campaign needs money, and my responsibility will be to be a partner and raise the money that we need to protect our seats and grow our seats where we can.
And I remember after the legislative session, Speaker of the House Dennis Bonnen was pretty open in saying if you are a sitting member of the legislature and you campaign against somebody else, which is pretty much your job now, right? That there would be consequences. Now that kind of was sidetracked in his scandal going on, right? That he has his own problems because he is accused of doing that against fellow Republicans.
And some Democrats.
And some Democrats.
So.
Do you feel like since that happened, that rule is out the window and it's game on for everybody in the House?
I'm more concerned. My passion, I serve on the Elections Committee. My passion is, what are we going to do to encourage people to vote? That means, it doesn't mean take out your opponent. It means promote good ideas, promote good people who are willing to put their life on a shelf and run for office. I know now, I finished my 3rd legislative session. I'm a product of the Ann Richards era. My goal is to get back to those times when you're judged by the content of your bill, not by the letter that's after your name. And I feel strongly about that.
Awesome. Representative Sally Israel, thanks so much.
Thank you, Phil.
Texas has an important election in just a few weeks, but a lot of voters don't even know about it.
They really help us to continue to shape the future of our state by having their voices heard.
One woman has the job of getting Texans to vote, what she's doing to get more people to the polls. Right now, more than 15.8 million Texans are registered to vote. That's a record number. And there's a new push to get more of those voters to the polls in November when Texans will decide the fate of several amendments to the state's constitution. A lot of responsibility to raise voter turnout falls on the new Texas Secretary of State. Ruth Hughes just started the job. She takes over after controversy earlier this year forced previous Secretary of State David Whitley to step down. You may remember lawmakers did not confirm his nomination after questions about his role in an effort to purge suspected non-citizen voters from the Texas voter rolls. Now, Hughes spoke with our Wes Rappaport, and she says she's focused on making sure everyone who is eligible to vote in this next election votes.
Why should we be civically engaged, and why is this upcoming election important?
Not everyone is aware that we actually have an election coming up this year, November 5th, with a lot of constitutional amendments, and so the deadline to register for those elections is October 7th, and so I'm really hoping that people know that, and if they're eligible to vote, that they register to vote by that October 7th deadline, and that they go to votetexas.gov to get some more details on what will be on the ballot if they would like to look into that, be better informed before they go to the polls. But we know that an active and engaged citizenry is really essential to our democracy, so we want to make sure that everyone that's eligible registers to vote.
What's the difference between getting people registered and actually compelling them to go out and vote?
At a local level, there's a lot of efforts in that respect. I mean, certainly we just want to make sure that people know their rights and they know that they have an opportunity to put their voices out there, make them be heard, and to shape the future of Texas in a way that reflects our values. And so it's an important opportunity. It's an important act of civic engagement. And so we do our best to promote it, to make sure people know that those opportunities are out there, and then ultimately to also facilitate whether it's polling places or early voting or many of the things that our local election officials do across the state to really facilitate the ability to vote and to get out and vote.
You get a year and a half to do the job at least until lawmakers weigh in and make a decision. That's sort of unlike your predecessor. Is that more pressure or less pressure in kind of the grand scheme of the responsibilities?
As far as that goes, I feel like I show up every day and do the best job I can do in the time that I have to do it, and I'm really proud and honored to serve, and that the governor has entrusted me with this position. I know that it's a very important time, and so I'm really committed to doing everything we can do to make sure that there is a lot of faith in the process, and that we get it right, and that we really secure that integrity of our election process. So I'm not focusing too much on a year and a half from now, but every day I know that we're going to make sure that we do the best we can to make sure Texans have a lot of faith in our system, and that they really help us to continue to shape the future of our state by having their voices heard.
What are you working on from a statewide perspective to encourage more engagement?
We certainly have a lot of social media outreach. We try to take these opportunities to get the word out as much as we can. I've been visiting some high schools to encourage students that are turning 18 to go ahead and register to vote if they're eligible, making sure that they appreciate the importance of it. Studies have showed the earlier in life that you begin to vote, the more likely you are to be a longtime voter. So I think that there's a lot of value in promoting that, and we're continuing to work at a local level as far as making sure they have the resources that they need to get the word out. It's just important to really take an opportunity to vote, since it's such a tremendous privilege that we have in this country.
People seem to bring politics into our voting process a lot. Is that something that you are conscious about, and how do you kind of separate those things to kind of remove the politics from that, I guess the civic engagement piece of it?
Sure. I think I'm focused on the civic engagement piece of it. I've been entrusted to serve in this position. My position in particular is the only of the 6 executive branch positions in the Constitution that is actually not an elected position. So I was appointed by the governor. I have the mandate of making sure that we protect the integrity of the election process, and that's where my focus is. It's not political, but it is very much in making sure that we get it right for Texas.
And if you're not registered to vote for the November election, you're running out of time. The deadline is Monday, October 7th. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Phil Prazen. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.